The entire source code for the human brain may be contained within the fully sequenced human genome, which when uncompressed is less than the size of a typical computer application. However, this genetic code is compressed in an incredibly sophisticated way that we don't fully understand how to decode yet, and it may not even be possible without the external resources our planet provides. It's important to note that the genome only describes how to prepare the basic structure of the brain, which is then filled with information absorbed from the surrounding culture as it develops. So while the fundamental architecture may be genetically encoded, a vast amount of information shaping the mind comes from the environment and experiences. Some have compared DNA to a configuration file for an immensely complex process that exists as a dynamic running system incorporating cellular mechanisms, the physical environment, and cultural influences. The DNA itself is not directly equivalent to the source code of the brain and mind. Looking at the raw computational power, the human brain has billions of neurons, each with thousands of connections. Today's most powerful computers and server farms are beginning to approach the sheer processing capacity of the human brain in terms of raw calculations per second. However, the human brain's complexity goes far beyond its raw computational power. Emulating its high-level functions may require understanding and modeling the interplay between genetics, biochemistry, and environmental factors that shape the mind throughout development. While artificial neural networks are making remarkable progress in narrow domains, the path to replicating the general intelligence and adaptability of the human mind is still an immense challenge we are only beginning to grapple with. Feet in running shoes have been mysteriously washing up on beaches along the coasts of the United States and Canada for years, sparking wild speculation about their origins. Some people attributed the grim discoveries to the work of serial killers, the mafia disposing of bodies, or even extraterrestrial activity. However, the truth behind these washed-up feet is far less sinister, though still quite sad. Coroners and authorities investigating the cases have determined that the feet likely belong to individuals who either died by suicide or drowned accidentally, with their bodies sinking to the bottom of the sea. As marine life feeds on the submerged bodies, the feet eventually separate from the remains due to natural decomposition processes. Thanks to advancements in running shoe technology, these detached feet, still encased in buoyant footwear, float back to the surface and are carried by currents until they wash ashore. While finding a decomposing foot on the beach is undoubtedly a horrific experience for beachgoers, the phenomenon is not linked to any criminal activity. Instead, it is a consequence of unfortunate deaths and the unique combination of modern shoe design and the effects of underwater decomposition. Authorities emphasize that these cases, while tragic, have reasonable explanations that do not involve foul play. The mysterious feet serve as a grim reminder of the many lives lost to the sea and the powerful forces of nature that can carry evidence of these tragedies to shores far and wide. Fossil evidence from an important archaeological site in northern Spain suggests that early human ancestors, possibly Neanderthals or their predecessors, may have employed a surprising strategy to survive the harsh winters hundreds of thousands of years ago: hibernation. Researchers examining fossilized bones from the site noticed seasonal variations and disruptions in bone growth, similar to the patterns seen in the bones of hibernating animals. They proposed that these early humans entered a state of decreased metabolism, allowing them to sleep through the coldest months when food was scarce. While the idea of human hibernation may seem far-fetched, the researchers point out that many mammals, including some primates, hibernate to cope with extreme conditions. They argue that the genetic basis and physiology for such a state could be preserved in humans. The fossils in question were found in a cave known as Cima de los Huesos, which has yielded thousands of teeth and bone fragments dating back over 400,000 years. The site has provided valuable insights into human evolution in Europe. One key factor supporting the hibernation hypothesis is the presence of a hibernating cave bear's remains in the same cave. The researchers suggest that the early humans and the cave bears both resorted to hibernation to survive the frigid conditions and food scarcity. However, some experts caution that alternative explanations for the bone variations should be fully explored before drawing conclusions. Additionally, the energy demands of the human brain during hibernation would have posed a significant challenge. Despite the reservations, the hibernation hypothesis offers a fascinating glimpse into the potential survival strategies of our early ancestors and could be further investigated through genetic studies of ancient human remains. Parthenogenesis, a form of asexual reproduction in which an unfertilized egg develops into a new individual, has been observed in various animal species, including guppies. While there have been claims of human parthenogenesis throughout history, particularly in religious contexts, scientifically confirmed cases are rare and often involve abnormalities. In some instances, an unfertilized human egg may begin to divide on its own, but cannot fully develop, leading to the formation of benign tumors called ovarian teratomas. These tumors can contain various tissue types, such as skin and nerve cells, and in rare cases may even form primitive fetal structures. One notable case reported in the 1990s involved a boy who was found to have some cells lacking genetic content from his father. Scientists believe that an unfertilized egg began to divide, and then some of its cells were fertilized by a sperm cell, resulting in a parthenogenetic chimera with two distinct cell lineages. Recent developments in stem cell research have led to the intentional creation of human stem cells from unfertilized eggs using parthenogenesis. This process could potentially offer a way to create genetically matched stem cells for the treatment of degenerative diseases in women. Interestingly, a controversial scientist unknowingly produced the first human embryos resulting from parthenogenesis in the early 2000s, initially claiming to have created cloned human embryos. Although this claim was later found to be fabricated, further examination revealed that the extracted stem cells showed indicators of parthenogenesis, making this scientist the first to successfully perform the process in human embryos.
Like this video and subscribe to Maker.
In the 1920s, a shocking rumor emerged from a primate research center in Florida, claiming that scientists had successfully created a human-chimpanzee hybrid, often referred to as a Humanzee or Chuman. According to the story, the researchers inseminated a female chimpanzee with human sperm, resulting in a pregnancy that was carried to term and produced a live offspring. However, as the scientists began to grapple with the moral and ethical implications of their actions, they allegedly decided to euthanize the infant just days or weeks after its birth. The tale of this supposed experiment has been circulating for decades, with some even claiming that photographic evidence of the hybrid exists. Despite the sensational nature of the story, there is little to no credible evidence supporting its veracity. The claims were popularized by a respected psychologist who stated that he heard the account from another credible scientist, but no names or concrete proof have ever been provided. The feasibility of a human-chimpanzee hybrid remains a topic of scientific debate. While some suggest that interbreeding between human ancestors and chimpanzees may have been possible millions of years ago, the genetic differences between the two species today make it unlikely that a hybrid embryo would successfully develop to term. Furthermore, even if such a hybrid were technically possible, the ethical concerns surrounding the creation of a human-animal hybrid are profound and would likely prevent any reputable scientist from attempting such an experiment. Hypersigils are a fascinating concept that explores the interplay between external personas and the primary self. The term, coined by a well-known comic book writer, describes a sigil that extends beyond a static image, incorporating elements such as characterization, drama, and plot. A hypersigil is essentially a sigil that operates in the fourth dimension, creating a powerful feedback loop that can alter reality according to one's intent. In the digital age, hypersigils have taken on a new meaning as they can be created through various online platforms such as personal blogs, social media profiles, and even fictional avatars. The choices we make in defining our online personas can have a profound impact on our offline lives, reinforcing behaviors and perceptions over time. The creation of a hypersigil is a highly immersive and absorbing process, requiring a deep level of concentration and focus. It can take the form of any extended artistic activity, such as a poem, story, song, or dance. The key is to become utterly absorbed in the unfolding of the hypersigil, allowing it to become a dynamic miniature model of the creator's universe. Experimenting with hypersigils is an exciting and relatively new territory, with the parameters still being explored. The process can be intense and even lead to obsession, but the potential for personal transformation and the alteration of one's reality is significant. In Greek mythology, the Hyperboreans were a mythical people believed to inhabit a sunny, temperate land in the far northern part of the known world, beyond the reach of the cold north wind. Despite their location in an otherwise frigid region, the Hyperboreans were said to live in a divinely blessed paradise, shielded from the harsh weather by the Riphean mountains. The earliest sources mentioning the Hyperboreans date back to ancient Greek poets who portrayed them as the favorites of Apollo, with some even considering them the mythical founders of Apollo's shrines. Over time, writers disagreed on the existence and location of Hyperborea, placing it in various parts of northern Eurasia, such as Britain, Scandinavia, or Siberia. Legends tell of the Hyperboreans' extraordinary longevity and happiness, with the sun rising and setting only once a year in their land. They were also believed to have a special connection to the gods, particularly Apollo, who was thought to spend his winters among them. The Hyperboreans were sometimes described as descendants of Boreas, the north wind, and the snow nymph Chione. These descendants, known as the Boreads, were said to be giant kings, around 10 feet tall, who ruled Hyperborea. Some ancient Greek authors identified the Hyperboreans with their Celtic neighbors to the north, possibly due to the way myths of the Golden Age were transplanted into the contemporary scene during Greek colonization and trade. In modern times, the concept of Hyperborea has been adopted by various esoteric and fringe groups, some of which view it as the ancient homeland of a superior race or the origin of Indo-European culture. The term Hyperborean has also been used metaphorically to describe a sense of distance from the ordinary or to refer to people living in cold northern climates. Certain hypothetical models of computation, known as hypercomputers, could theoretically compute functions that regular computers cannot. For a computer to qualify as a hypercomputer, it would need to be able to solve problems that are impossible for standard Turing machines, which are the basis for all computers we use today. Some proposed designs for hypercomputers include machines that could complete infinitely many computational steps in a finite time, or that could harness weird spacetime physics like closed time-like curves. Quantum computers that use infinite superpositions of states have also been suggested. Other hypothetical hypercomputers might always eventually output the correct answer to uncomputable problems, but could get stuck on wrong answers for unknowably long times before fixing their mistakes. However, there are many challenges to actually building a working hypercomputer in the real world. Most designs require physically impossible components or violate known laws of physics. And from a mathematical perspective, hypercomputation doesn't really introduce wholly new capabilities. It mainly amounts to clever ways of embedding oracles or advice functions into otherwise standard machines to boost their power. So while an interesting theoretical concept, the practical barriers to hypercomputation are immense. Certain objects are so massive and distributed across time and space that they defy our normal understanding of what an object is. These hyperobjects are all around us, but we can only perceive them indirectly through their effects on other things. Take global warming, for example. We don't directly experience the totality of global warming itself. Instead, we feel its localized impacts like more frequent heat waves or intense storms in specific places. But global warming as a whole is much bigger than any individual weather event. It's a vast, complex phenomenon made up of countless interactions between the sun, greenhouse gases, the oceans, living things, and more. Hyperobjects have a kind of sticky, inescapable quality to them. The more we try to resist or ignore them, the more entangled with them we become. They're so huge that they seem to warp our sense of time and space. And they're not just made up of single things, but networks of relationships between many objects. Some thinkers believe hyperobjects take on an almost spiritual dimension. They'll likely outlast humanity and could haunt future civilizations. Remnants of our current age, like styrofoam or nuclear waste, may end up being treated with a kind of reverence by societies to come. The idea of hyperobjects can be as mind-bending as the hyperobjects themselves. To some, the concept seems so broad that it loses meaning. But at the very least, it's a powerful way to highlight the scope and severity of the ecological crises we face today. In the realm of philosophy, there's a concept of a place beyond the heavens where perfect ideas and forms reside. This Hyperuranion, or Platonic realm, is thought to contain the ideal models of everything we experience in the real world. The theory goes that what we perceive in our everyday lives are merely imperfect copies or shadows of these perfect forms that exist in the Hyperuranion. For example, any chair we sit on is just an approximation of the perfect chair form that exists in this higher realm. Some thinkers even place this realm above the gods themselves, suggesting that divine beings depended on knowledge of these perfect forms for their power and wisdom. In this view, the Hyperuranion is the ultimate source of reality that shapes both the heavens and the earth. This idea carried on into medieval times, with some arguing that God resides in a space called the Empyrean, which exists outside of heaven itself. From this perch, God acts as the prime mover, the driving force behind all motion and change in the universe. Not everyone bought into this theory, of course. Certain alchemists rejected the notion of a divided cosmos with perfect realms above and imperfect ones below. To them, nature was a unified whole, not a collection of separate conceptual categories. While it may sound abstract or fanciful, the Hyperuranion concept was an influential attempt to grapple with questions of reality, divinity, and the nature of existence that still echo in philosophical debates today. While all known life on Earth is carbon-based and requires water, it's fun to imagine the possibilities for alien biochemistries that could exist in the universe. Silicon is often brought up as an alternative to carbon. It sits right below carbon on the periodic table and can form molecules that are large and complex enough to carry biological information, somewhat similar to carbon-based life. But silicon has some big drawbacks compared to carbon. It's much less abundant in the cosmos, and its chemistry is generally less versatile. Under the conditions on Earth's surface, silicon doesn't form many compounds that would be stable enough for life to utilize. Some other elements like boron or various metals could theoretically form complex structures rivaling those of carbon-based organic compounds under the right conditions, but these would require environments very different from Earth, like atmospheres with different compositions or much higher temperatures. Even if alien life used familiar elements like carbon, it might rely on solvents other than water. Ammonia, methane, formamide, and hydrogen fluoride have all been proposed as possible alternatives. These could allow biochemistry to function at temperatures or pressures very different from those on Earth's surface. Saturn's moon Titan has even been speculated to harbor methane-based life forms. The possibilities for wildly different forms of life are as vast as the cosmos itself. While we haven't found any concrete examples of alternative biochemistries yet, the search continues. The study of these ideas not only helps us imagine what alien life might be like, but also provides valuable insights into the principles that make life on Earth possible and how it might have originated. Pondering these far-out concepts stretches our Earth-centric assumptions and reminds us of the incredible diversity the universe may contain. After a major earthquake and tsunami hit Japan, a local chef was asked to come up with a use for misshapen strawberries that were going to waste because consumers wouldn't buy them. He discovered that a chemical extracted from the berries called polyphenol had an interesting effect when added to cream. It made the mixture harder and more resistant to melting. This discovery led to the development of special popsicles and soft-serve ice cream that maintain their shape and texture even under intense heat. The treats use regular ice cream ingredients, but with the addition of strawberry polyphenol. The modified ice cream can withstand temperatures over 100 degrees Fahrenheit without turning into a puddle. In a dramatic demonstration of its heat resistance, the sweet concoction can even be set on fire briefly without melting. For now, this marvel of food science is only available in Japan, where it was invented. The developers currently have no plans to export the unique frozen desserts overseas. So if you're craving a scoop of ice cream that could double as a candle on your next birthday cake, you'll have to book a trip to the land of the rising sun to try it. Just don't be surprised if the ice cream parlor hands you a match instead of a spoon. An 8,000-year-old skeleton, known as Minnesota Woman or Pelican Rapids, Minnesota Woman, was discovered in 1931 during a highway construction project. The bones were identified as those of a teenage girl who had never given birth. She was found with two notable artifacts, an elk horn dagger and a conch shell pendant. The conch shell is particularly interesting because it came from a species previously thought to only exist in Florida, suggesting the existence of long-distance trade or migration routes. The details of the girl's death are uncertain because the site was not properly excavated by archaeologists. However, the presence of a layer of broken shells over her body suggests she may have drowned in a glacial lake, either by falling through ice or from a boat. This discovery challenged prevailing scientific views at the time, which held that humans had only arrived in the Americas relatively recently. Minnesota Woman provided evidence of a much longer human presence on the continent, now recognized to extend well into the Archaic period. In 1999, the skeletal remains were reburied in South Dakota by Sioux tribes, honoring the ancient woman's cultural heritage. While no longer available for scientific study, Minnesota Woman's discovery marked an important shift in our understanding of the deep history of human habitation in the Americas. Some people experience a fascinating phenomenon where certain concepts or ideas trigger vivid sensory experiences, like seeing colors when they think of particular letters or numbers. This is often called synesthesia, from the Greek for union of senses. But recent research suggests a better name might be ideasthesia, meaning sensing ideas. The key insight is that it's the meaning of the stimulus that matters, not just its sensory properties. For example, a synesthete might see the letter S as blue, but if you show them a squiggly shape that could be either an S or a 5, the color they perceive will depend on which meaning their brain assigns in the moment. This semantic basis shows up in other ways too. Synesthetes can quickly develop associations between unfamiliar symbols and colors as soon as those symbols acquire meaning. And the same musical note might evoke different colors depending on how it's labeled. It's the idea that counts, not the raw sound. Ideasthesia doesn't just apply to synesthesia either. The famous Booba-Kiki effect, where people consistently match certain nonsense words to certain shapes, may work the same way. Kiki and spiky shapes seem to activate a common network of concepts, like sharpness and intensity, while booba. And rounded shapes share meanings like softness and calm. So in many cases, our senses may not be talking directly to each other, but rather are linked through the web of meaning we assign to everything we experience. That abstract conceptual level, as much as raw perception, colors our mental life. Synesthesia and related phenomena provide a fascinating window into this interplay of ideas and senses that we often take for granted. In the world of retail, there's a curious phenomenon known as the Ikea Effect. It's the tendency for people to place a surprisingly high value on objects they've partially put together themselves, like the famously assemble-it-yourself furniture from the Swedish megastore. What's interesting is that this effect seems to hold true regardless of the actual quality of the finished product. This quirk of human psychology ties into something called the sunk cost effect. That's when we keep investing in something, even if it's not rational to do so, because we've already put resources into it. In the case of self-assembled items, the sunk cost is the time and effort we've expended. Having put in that work, we become reluctant to abandon the end result, no matter how wonky or wobbly it may be. The IKEA effect doesn't just apply to furniture, though. You can see it in all sorts of arenas where people invest a bit of themselves into something. Pyramid schemes and multi-level marketing companies, for instance, are notorious for exploiting this tendency. Participants often feel a sense of pride and ownership in the organization's success because they've been directly involved in building it up through recruiting, selling, and so on. In the final years of communist East Germany, the Swedish furniture giant Ikea benefited from the use of forced prison labor by some of its suppliers. A recently released independent report confirmed that political prisoners were involved in manufacturing goods for Ikea between 25 to 30 years ago. Ikea managers at the time were aware of the possibility that prisoners were being used, but failed to prevent it. The company expressed deep regret for this oversight, acknowledging that their control systems were not as robust as they are today. The revelations about Ikea are just the tip of the iceberg, according to a victims' rights group. Many companies took advantage of forced prison labor in East Germany from the 1960s through the 1980s. The group hopes that Ikea and others will consider compensating former prisoners, who often suffered lasting psychological and physical trauma from the grueling forced labor. Ikea commissioned the independent investigation after allegations first surfaced in the 1980s and resurfaced in a recent documentary. The company has pledged to continue supporting efforts to shed light on the use of prisoner labor in former East Germany. While Ikea has taken a leading role in confronting this troubling aspect of its past, the revelations underscore the often hidden human costs that can lurk behind the products we buy, even from seemingly benign sources. As consumers and as a society, grappling with these uncomfortable truths is a crucial step towards building a more just and transparent global economy. In the late 1700s, a secret society known as the Illuminati was founded in Bavaria, which is part of modern-day Germany. The group opposed religious influence over public life and what they saw as abuse of state power. They sought to put an end to these issues, but not by dominating or controlling others themselves. The Illuminati were made up of freethinkers and had many literary men among their ranks. Internal divisions and the departure of a key founder led to the society expanding rapidly by recruiting prominent Freemasons, which gave them a foothold in many German cities. An edict by the Bavarian ruler and pressure from the Catholic Church led to the Illuminati being outlawed, though the group's legacy took on a life of its own. In the following years, the Illuminati were accused by conservative and religious critics of continuing on in secret and being behind events like the French Revolution. While the Bavarian Illuminati were fully suppressed and did not survive, the myth of their influence persisted. The idea was later popularized by two famous books published in the late 1700s, claiming that the Illuminati represented an ongoing conspiracy to control world events. This launched the Illuminati into the realm of pop culture and conspiracy theories, where they are now depicted as a shadowy group pulling the strings behind the scenes. Many modern conspiracy theories allege that major world events are being controlled by the Illuminati and that notable people, sometimes even US presidents, are secret members. However, there is no actual evidence supporting these claims. The Illuminati remain a fascinating case of a small historical secret society whose mythos and legend have grown to epic proportions in the public imagination. Their enduring appeal speaks to our fascination with the idea of hidden knowledge and power working from the shadows to shape the course of human events.